Good evening, sleepless friend. I'm Plato. Yeah, that Plato. Marble busts, fancy robes, that eternal, serious philosopher face, like I'm calculating the secrets of existence, or silently panicking because someone borrowed my sandals and never gave them back. Both are equally possible. But look, tonight, forget the statues. Forget the dusty scrolls. Forget the whole wise sage gazing into infinity vibe. I'm just a guy, wide awake at stupid o'clock, hanging out with you. And if this late-night rant helps you stop thinking about whether you accidentally offended that one barista back in 2019, feel free to drop a like, or even subscribe. Marcus Aurelius would call it an exercise of your rational will. Me? I think he just liked seeing his subscriber count go up. The man was many things. A Stoic emperor, a philosopher, but let's be honest, probably also a stats junkie. So tell me where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love imagining this invisible army of insomniacs scattered across the world, all under the same stars. Some of us pondering the nature of justice, and some of us obsessing over whether we left the stove on. Now, come closer to the glow of the fire. Let's wander together through thoughts and shadows, and see if, along the way, I can help you find a little peace, and maybe even sleep. So, who am I really? I mean, who the hell is Plato? When you hear my name, you probably picture some stone-faced bust, eyes locked on the horizon like I'm trying to solve quantum mechanics, or plotting revenge on whoever spilled wine on my toga at last week's symposium. And, yeah, that's technically me. But also, totally not me. Because behind the statues and the fancy Latin inscriptions, and behind those philosophy books gathering dust on your shelves, I was just a guy. A guy who laughed, who worried, who daydreamed, and who, more nights than I'd care to admit, lay flat on his back, staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m., counting fig trees in my head because sleep was nowhere to be found. Just like you. My real name? Aristocles. Yeah, try fitting that on a Starbucks cup. It means broad in Greek. Some people said it was because of my shoulders. Others, far less polite, claimed it was because of my forehead. Ugh, shadows. Either way, Plato stuck, like hummus on a toga. I grew up in Athens. My family was aristocratic, which basically means they expected me to become somebody trademark. You know, the ancient Greek version of my son's going to Harvard. I was that kid, sprinting through dusty streets, dodging donkeys, sandals flapping like I was auditioning for Greek Ninja Warrior. The air smelled like olive oil, roasted barley, and the faint panic of merchants yelling over amphora prices. And let me tell you, Athens was wild. You couldn't walk 2 blocks without bumping into some guy in a fancy robe proclaiming he alone had the secret to truth. For the right number of drachmas, of course. The sophists were basically the Instagram coaches of the ancient world. Want to win any argument, even when you're 100% wrong? Smash that subscribe button. Ugh, shadows. But then, there was Socrates. Ah, Socrates, the original unsolicited podcaster. Picture this. You're just trying to buy some figs at the market, minding your own business, and suddenly this barefoot guy appears out of nowhere, stares into your soul, and goes, "So, what is justice?" And, just like that, your whole afternoon is gone. Socrates never charged a single drachma. Nope. He'd obliterate your entire worldview for free. He'd crash dinner parties, cloak flapping, eyes sparkling like he was about to drop the hottest mixtape of moral dilemmas, and suddenly announce, "But what is love, truly?" And just like that, everyone freezes mid-bite, wine halfway to their lips, staring at me like I'm supposed to explain all of human existence. Meanwhile, I'm just sitting there thinking, dude, can I eat my honey cake in peace? Tell me you don't have at least one friend like that, the one who transforms every casual hangout into a surprise TED Talk. Another time, Socrates stopped dead in the middle of the agora to argue with a fish seller about justice. The poor woman just wanted to sell sardines. Instead, she ended up starring in an impromptu philosophy debate that drew a crowd bigger than a Black Friday sale at the olive oil shop. Ugh, shadows. And me? I was silently scanning for the nearest olive barrel to crawl into. People always ask me if Socrates was annoying. Yes, absolutely. And yet, I adored him. He was the bravest man I ever knew, and definitely the weirdest. He never wore shoes, didn't seem to feel heat or cold. Wandered around muttering to himself, sometimes standing perfectly still for hours, staring into space like he was waiting for Zeus to text him back. And he'd ask questions that still bounce around my skull even now, lying awake at night, like, "Do you really know what you think you know?" No, Socrates, I probably don't. None of us really do. Ugh, shadows. But he taught me something priceless. Wisdom starts by admitting how little we actually know, and that searching for truth is worth it, even if it costs you a ton of sleep and a social life. But look, I wasn't only about philosophy. Athens was a roller coaster, magnificent temples glittering under the sun, artists carving beauty out of stone, poets spinning words into silk, and beneath all that grandeur, fear, wars, plagues, political drama messier than a group chat full of drunk politicians. People were obsessed with public image. One day you were the city's golden child, and the next they were voting to toss you off a cliff. Sound familiar? We didn't have Instagram, but trust me, reputation anxiety was alive and well. We didn't have Twitter, but gossip spread faster than a Spartan on an espresso binge. And if someone didn't like you, they'd carve a salty little poem about you into a wall, or accuse you of corrupting the youth. Ugh, shadows. Even philosophy wasn't safe. People thought philosophers were dangerous troublemakers planting weird ideas in young brains. Some things never change. Sometimes I wonder what people today would think of me. Would I be Plato, the content creator? Absolutely. I'd have a YouTube channel, wearing a linen hoodie instead of a toga, ranting about the allegory of the cave under soft ring light glow. Smash that like button if you believe shadows aren't reality. Ugh, shadows. But underneath all the modern gadgets, we're still the same creatures. We love, we fear, we hope. We lie awake at 3 a.m., staring at the ceiling, wondering if we're wasting our lives, or if we left the olive lamp burning. So, yeah, that's why I'm here tonight, because I've been there, awake, mind racing, heart pounding over questions that have no easy answers. I used to wander Athens at night, no real plan, just trying to escape the endless chatter. Athens was addicted to opinions. Everyone had a take on politics, love, justice, poetry, or which way to grill fish. But at night, the city softened. Conversations dropped to whispers. Even arguments paused, like the whole city stopped to breathe. I'd stroll under the long stoa near the agora, the marble still warm under my sandals, stars peeking through wooden beams overhead. I'd overhear two young guys arguing about democracy. One was yelling, "Democracy is the highest virtue," and the other shouting back, "People are sheep." And the first guy fires off. Then philosophers are just shepherds drunk on their own importance. And there I was, lurking in the shadows thinking, both right and both absolutely wrong. Ugh, shadows. I'd wander down narrow streets glowing with oil lamps. Inside, I'd catch glimpses of families finishing dinner. Kids running around waving fig leaves. Old men drifting off mid-sentence with clay cups slipping from their hands. The smell of garlic and herbs drifting out into the night. The city felt alive, but softer somehow. Like she was whispering secrets only the sleepless could hear. And the sea. Gods, the sea. Even from the center of Athens you could hear it. A soft hush like silk dragged over marble. A reminder that the world was vast and that all our drama was just a tiny blip in the grand scheme. One of my favorite spots was the Areopagus Hill. I'd stand there, wind tugging at my cloak, looking out over rooftops sprinkled with tiny torchlights. Beyond that, the sea stretched into endless darkness, reflecting the stars. It made me feel small, but also infinite in the weirdest, most comforting way. I'd stand there thinking about merchants snoring away, counting coins in their dreams, poets composing verses in their heads, soldiers steeling themselves for war, lovers lying awake, hearts pounding over someone's laughter, someone's eyes. So many stories, hidden behind wooden doors. Sometimes I felt like the night was the only time Athens told the truth. By day, everyone performed, played roles, respectable citizen, loyal son, devout worshiper. But at night, the masks slipped. People whispered secrets under colonnades. Lovers snuck kisses in the shadows. Politicians confessed doubts to the stars. Even the gods seemed to lean in closer to listen. And the stars. My eternal insomnia buddies. Tiny fires scattered across the sky, pulsing like quiet thoughts. Sometimes I wondered if they were the souls of philosophers who'd finally escaped the cave. Or maybe just cosmic nightlights reminding us the universe is way bigger than our petty fears. Ugh, shadows. I know you've had nights like that too. When your mind starts playing mental ping-pong, replaying every awkward moment you've ever lived, or doom-scrolling TikTok until you're watching a goat practice yoga. Ugh, shadows. Believe me, I get it. I've lain awake, staring at shadows crawling across the walls, my heart racing for no reason. Some of my best ideas came under starlight, and so did some of my worst existential spirals. Because the night is a mirror. It shows you your brightest hopes and your darkest corners. Yet there's beauty in it. There's wisdom in the hush between sounds, in the cool night breeze against your face, in the gentle rhythm of your own breath under a sky so vast it makes all your worries shrink. One of my favorite places was the harbor at Piraeus. Ships creaked gently against the docks, sails folded like sleeping wings. Lanterns swayed from tall masts, casting golden ripples over black water. The air smelled of salt, pine pitch, and fish guts. Quintessential Piraeus. Fishermen mended nets under the stars, humming tunes older than half the gods. Merchants whispered deals in shadowy corners, and somewhere, inevitably, a dog barked at absolutely nothing. Ugh, shadows. Sometimes I'd find Socrates there too, standing alone, staring at the horizon like he expected the sun to rise personally for him. Once, I asked him what he was thinking. He didn't even look at me, just said, "I'm listening to the silence, Plato." It's louder than words. Then he grinned that secret grin and wandered off into the dark. I think about that a lot, listening to silence. These days you'd call it meditation or mindfulness. Or you'd download an app that plays rain sounds and whispers, inhale, exhale. We didn't have apps. We had the sea and the stars. And sometimes, Socrates standing very, very still. See, the night has always belonged to philosophers, poets, and the perpetually sleepless. It's when your brain drifts toward questions too big for daylight. Who am I? Why can't I sleep? Is there meaning? Or are we all just flickers of light between two eternities of darkness? But let me promise you this, friend. Even the longest night has a soft edge where dawn begins creeping in. Shadows stretch, but they never last forever. So next time you're lying awake, staring at your ceiling, remember, you're in good company. I've been there. So has Socrates, and countless others across centuries, all staring up at the same stars, asking the same impossible questions. So, stay with me a little longer. Let's keep wandering through Athens. There's still plenty of night left, and so many secrets hidden in the dark. Ugh, shadows. Let me take you somewhere. And no, I don't mean the afterlife. Don't panic. Close your eyes for a moment, unless you're listening to this while driving. In which case, seriously, keep them open. I may be a philosopher, but I'm not a monster. Imagine Athens, but not the blazing white Athens you've seen in paintings, or in that one vacation ad where some influencer pretends to find herself while perched on a marble column. Nope. Forget the blazing sun turning marble into a pizza stone. Forget merchants hollering like they're running an ancient QVC, waving bolts of cloth and screaming about discounts. Forget the hammering blacksmiths, the donkey traffic jams, the full-blown amphora road rage. Instead, picture Athens wrapped in velvet darkness, breathing slow and deep under a blanket of stars so bright they'd put your LED ring light to shame. Athens at night was my absolute favorite version of her. Everything went softer, like a painting rinsed in silver. Columns lost their sharp edges and melted into gentle shadows. Torches flickered in doorways, and dark corners curled around you like cats, watching you from the shadows, plotting your doom, or possibly just waiting for treats. It's hard to tell with cats. Shadows. Even the air felt different at night. Cooler, silkier, tinged with salt from the sea. Sometimes carrying whispers of roasted meat drifting out of some late-night tavern, or that sticky-sweet perfume of crushed figs. The whole city became a chorus of gentle sounds, sandals brushing stone, laughter drifting over courtyards, and always, that one dog barking at absolutely nothing like he's seen the ghost of Leonidas in the alley. I used to wander the city at night, not always for any philosophical purpose, mind you. Sometimes I just needed to escape the endless chatter of the day. The debates, the arguments, the fights over politics, love, justice, poetry, whether fish is better grilled or baked. Athens was addicted to words. Everyone was basically auditioning for a TED Talk, 24/7. But at night, words got softer. Conversations turned into murmurs. Even the arguments paused, like the entire city was holding its breath. Even the sophists seemed to finally shut up. Small miracles. I remember one night walking under the long stoa, the colonnaded walkway near the agora. The marble floor was still warm from the day, like heated floors in some overpriced modern spa. Stars winked at me through the beams above, and from somewhere far off, I could hear the soft splash of a fountain, like the city's secret heartbeat. Two young guys were standing under a torch, locked in debate. One was ranting about how democracy was the highest virtue, that every man deserved a voice. The other was convinced that crowds were dangerous, that only philosophers should rule. I lurked in the shadows, listening like the world's creepiest groupie. And then the second guy flung his hands in the air and yelled, "People are sheep." And the first guy shot back, "Then philosophers are just shepherds drunk on their own importance." And I swear, I nearly lost it. Because they were both right, and both hilariously, completely wrong. Ugh, shadows. That was Athens for you. Even at midnight, someone was out there screaming about the fate of the city or the nature of the soul. Meanwhile, I was just trying to enjoy a peaceful stroll without getting drafted into a spontaneous ethics debate. Sometimes I'd wander down narrow streets where oil lamps glowed behind wooden shutters. From inside, I'd catch glimpses of families finishing supper. Kids chasing each other with fig leaves. Old men nodding off mid-sentence, clay cups sliding from their fingers. The smell of garlic and herbs wafted out into the streets, mixing with the cool scent of stone and dust. It was like wandering through a living painting, except occasionally someone would try to sell you a suspicious-looking sausage. Athens, baby. The city felt alive, but in a softer way at night, like she was whispering secrets meant only for the sleepless. And trust me, the Sleepless Club was pretty exclusive. Membership included philosophers, poets, insomniacs, and every single guy still trying to figure out if the girl from the symposium actually liked him or just liked his discourse on metaphysics. And then there was the sea. Ah, the sea. Gods, don't get me started. Even from the city center you could hear it, a soft hush like silk dragged over marble, a reminder that the world was enormous, and Athens was just this bright little speck clinging to the edge of the waves. One of my favorite places to stand was on the Areopagus Hill. I'd plant myself up there, wind whipping my cloak around like I was cosplaying a Greek superhero, and look out over the rooftops. Below, the city glittered with tiny torchlights and oil lamps flickering low. Beyond that, the sea lay endless and dark, reflecting stars that looked close enough to pluck out of the sky and pop in your pocket. It always made me feel small, and yet weirdly infinite at the same time. Like I was one tiny pixel in a cosmic painting, and yet also connected to the entire damn canvas. Shadows. I'd stand there thinking about the people sleeping below. Merchants dreaming of their next big deal. Poets spinning new verses in their sleep. Soldiers gripping their blankets, knowing they'd march off to war at sunrise. And countless lovers lying awake, hearts pounding, wondering if the person they loved was also lying awake thinking about them. So many hidden stories, tucked away behind wooden doors. Sometimes it felt like the night was the only time Athens told the truth. By day, everyone performed. Everyone wore a mask. The respectable citizen, the pious worshiper, the dutiful son. But at night, the masks slipped. People whispered secrets under the colonnades. Lovers stole kisses in the shadows. Politicians stared at the stars and confessed doubts they'd never say aloud in daylight. Even the gods seemed to lean closer to listen. And the stars. Oh, the stars were my insomnia buddies. Tiny fires scattered across the heavens, pulsing like neurons in the brain of the cosmos. Sometimes I'd wonder if they were the souls of philosophers who'd finally escaped the cave and floated free. Or maybe they were just cosmic post-it notes, reminding us how laughably small our problems really are. Ugh. Shadows. I know you've had nights like that, too. When the whole world goes quiet, and your brain decides to bust out the highlight reel of every embarrassing thing you've ever done. Or you end up doom-scrolling until TikTok serves you a video of a goat learning yoga. Ugh. Shadows. Believe me, I get it. I've laid awake, watching shadows creep across the walls, my heart beating for no reason. Some of my best ideas were born under starlight, and some of my worst existential spirals, too, because the night is a mirror. It shows you your brightest hopes and your darkest corners. Yet there's beauty in it, too. There's a quiet wisdom in the hush between sounds, in the cool breeze brushing your face, in the gentle rhythm of your breath as you stand beneath a sky so vast it makes even the biggest fears shrink. Even the city's stones seemed to sigh at night. Steps worn smooth by generations of feet. Walls whispering the names of lovers and traitors alike. History pressing gently against the skin of the present. Another place I adored was the harbor of Piraeus. The ships creaked softly against the wooden docks, their sails furled like sleeping wings. Lanterns swung from tall masts, casting gold ripples over black water. The air smelled of salt, pine pitch, and fish guts. Quintessential Piraeus. Fishermen sat on overturned crates, mending nets under starlight, humming songs older than half the gods. Merchants whispered shady deals in shadowy corners. And somewhere, always, a dog barked at nothing. Just nothing. Ugh. Shadows. I'd walk along the piers, dragging my fingertips along thick ropes, thinking about how every single ship carried stories across the water. Spices, letters, secrets, sometimes even wars. Bad news traveled by ship like a drunk uncle arriving uninvited to a wedding. And sometimes, in those dark hours just before dawn, I'd find Socrates standing there too, alone, staring at the horizon like he expected the sun to rise purely for him. Once, I asked him what he was thinking. He didn't even look at me, just murmured, "I'm listening to the silence, Plato. It's louder than words." Then he gave me that sly little grin and disappeared into the night. I think about that a lot, listening to silence. These days you'd call it mindfulness, or meditation, or you'd download an app that plays rain sounds and whispers at you to breathe in for 4 counts and out for 6. We didn't have apps. We had the sea, and the stars, and sometimes Socrates, standing incredibly still. See, the night has always belonged to philosophers, poets, and the perpetually sleepless. It's the hour when your brain drifts toward questions too big for daylight. Who am I? Why can't I sleep? Is there meaning to it all? Or are we just flickers of light between 2 eternities of dark? But let me promise you this, friend. Even the longest night has a soft edge where dawn begins to creep in. Shadows stretch, but they never last forever. Ugh. Shadows. So next time you're staring at your ceiling at 3 a.m., remember, you're not alone. I've been there. So has Socrates. And countless others across centuries, all staring up at the same stars, asking the same impossible questions. So, stay with me a little longer. Let's keep wandering through Athens. There's still so much night left, and so many secrets waiting to be whispered in the dark. Still not sleeping, huh? Well, I guess that means I'm failing miserably at my job as your ancient Greek lullaby machine. Ugh. Shadows. But hey, look on the bright side. It just means we get to spend more time together, which, let's be honest, might be the best consolation prize since free pita samples at the Agora. So, let me tell you a story. One you might have stumbled across in some philosophy class, or maybe flipped past in a dusty book while desperately searching for memes instead. But tonight, let's ditch the textbooks. Let's talk like friends. Just you, me, and the fire crackling away like it's trying out for a percussion section. A long time ago, before hashtags, before TikTok dances, before anyone even knew how to spell algorithm, I told a story about a cave. Picture it, a cave deep underground, damp, dark, zero ambiance lighting, probably smells like old sandals and regret. And in this cave, people sit chained up, unable to turn their heads. They're forced to stare at the wall in front of them, where shadows flicker and dance, thrown there by a fire burning behind them. And to these prisoners, the shadows are reality, because it's all they've ever seen. They have no clue that there's a whole world outside those stone walls, a world bursting with sunshine, fields, seas, fresh breezes, and baklava. Okay, maybe I didn't mention baklava in the original, but honestly, it should have been in there. Ugh. Shadows. Anyway, one day, I said, one prisoner gets freed. Slowly, painfully, he turns around. The fire stabs his eyes. He's blinking like someone who accidentally opened the front camera on their phone. But he keeps going. He stumbles upward, limbs shaking, towards the mouth of the cave. And finally, squinting and half-blind, he emerges into blinding sunlight. At first, he's a complete wreck, eyes watering. Everything's too bright. He probably regrets every single life choice that got him into this mess. But little by little, his vision adjusts. He sees reflections in water. He sees the stars, the moon, the sun itself. And for the first time, he realizes those shadows in the cave were just cheap knockoffs. Ugh. Shadows. They were echoes, not the real deal. It's a good story, right? But here's the part they sometimes skip over in class. Even after seeing the truth, the freed prisoner often wants to go back. Because the cave, however grim, however cramped, feels familiar. It's small. It's predictable. You know where the walls are. And sometimes, predictability feels safer than blinding truth. Now, lean in close while I whisper this into the hush of night. Insomnia is a cave. When you're lying awake at 3 a.m., mind racing, heart hammering, you're chained inside your own private cave, watching shadows on the wall of your skull. And those shadows? Oh, they come in all shapes. Regrets, fears, awkward memories that pounce out of nowhere and smack you in the face like a sandal thrown by an angry Athenian. Ugh, shadows. You stare at the ceiling. You replay conversations from 5 years ago, convinced you said the absolute dumbest thing possible. You catastrophize about tomorrow's meeting, or next month's rent, or the possibility that you might have spinach in your teeth during a critical life moment. Those shadows grow huge, monstrous, stretching into grotesque shapes across your inner walls. And even though you'd sell your soul for a few hours of sleep, part of you stays chained there. Because, even when they hurt, those shadows feel familiar. Trust me, I know that cave intimately. I've sat there, watching flickering images in my own mind. I've worried about the fate of Athens. I've questioned whether my fancy philosophical ideas mattered at all. I've lain awake, trying to solve questions that refused to be solved. Like, does justice exist? why do figs give me indigestion? And seriously, where do all my left sandals go? Once, Socrates caught me pacing outside my house under the moonlight. He looked at me with those bright, mischievous eyes and said, "Plato, why does your mind circle the same thoughts like a dog chasing its tail?" And I shot back, "Because the tail keeps moving, Socrates." He laughed so hard, a rooster crowed 3 hours ahead of schedule. Ugh, shadows. But here's the kicker. Even Socrates, for all his cosmic wisdom, sometimes fell into his own cave of shadows. I once found him standing frozen in the agora for hours, completely oblivious to the crowd swirling around him like a philosophical mosh pit. People thought he'd been struck down by divine inspiration. Later, he confessed he'd simply been trying to remember one question he'd meant to ask me the day before. We are all prisoners sometimes, every one of us. We all stare at walls that show us only pieces of the truth, never the whole picture. Modern life hasn't changed that. Your cave has glowing screens instead of flickering torchlight. Your shadows come shaped like push notifications, doom-scrolling news headlines, filtered photos of influencers who apparently never sweat, and that one email lurking in your inbox like an assassin. Ugh, shadows. Your thoughts bounce around your skull like echoes in a stone chamber. Am I good enough? Did I screw up that conversation? Will I ever figure out what the hell I'm supposed to be doing with my life? Trust me, I've heard those same questions whispered under starlight thousands of years ago. Athenians worried about reputation, money, love, health. They worried they'd get laughed at in the assembly. They worried the gods might be in a bad mood and drop a plague on them. They worried their words would vanish into oblivion. Sound familiar? So the cave endures. Insomnia becomes a private theater where your mind projects old failures, future fears, and secret doubts in full IMAX resolution. The shadows look vivid, terrifyingly real, but they're only shadows, echoes on a wall. Ugh, shadows. Sometimes I wonder what your cave looks like. Maybe it's lit by the cold blue glow of your phone screen. Maybe it echoes with pings and buzzes. Maybe the shadows are shaped like Instagram reels or online arguments you wish you'd never joined. There's no shame in it. Even philosophers find themselves staring at walls, forgetting there's a sun outside. I think part of why insomnia hurts so much is because night makes the cave feel endless. Time stretches like warm wax dripping from a candle. Minutes crawl by, heavy and sticky. You feel trapped inside yourself, convinced that every other human on Earth is sleeping peacefully while your brain is auditioning for Cirque du Soleil. But let me remind you of something gentle and true. Even the longest night has a dawn. The cave always has an exit, even if sometimes it's hard to see it from where you're sitting. And sometimes the first step out is ridiculously simple. It's just breathing, in and out. Feel the cool air slide into your chest. Listen to the fire crackle beside us. Let my words be a tiny torch flickering in your personal darkness. Ugh, shadows. We'll talk more in a second about how to walk out of that cave. But for now, just know this. You are not alone in the dark. So, come on. Let's keep walking, friend. Stay close to the firelight a little longer. Leaving the cave isn't easy. For that prisoner in my story, climbing out meant agony. The sunlight burned his eyes like a million paparazzi flashes. He stumbled around, squinting, half blind, questioning all his life choices. The truth wasn't gentle at first. It was blinding. And sometimes, when we start facing our own shadows, we feel that same sting. We'd rather slip back into old thoughts, even painful ones, because at least we know the script. We cling to the comfort of familiar worries. We replay past humiliations on an endless mental loop. We obsess about things we can't control, like whether anyone noticed that weird squeak our sandals made during a speech. Ugh, shadows. Why do we do it? Because the cave feels safe, predictable. No surprises, no blinding light. Just the same walls, the same shadows, the same stories. But listen close, friend. Staying in the cave means missing the sunrise. I believe that's why philosophy exists, not just to stuff your brain with fancy words, but to gently, stubbornly guide you out of the cave, to remind you that outside those walls there's a world drenched in color and laughter, in wild beauty and weirdness. And, yes, even the possibility of sleep. Modern caves might look different, but they work the same way. You pick up your phone at 2 a.m. because you're desperate for a distraction, and for a few minutes that glow feels comforting. But then the shadows creep in. News stories that steal your peace, endless reels, perfect faces smiling on perfect beaches, angry comments from strangers who don't even know your real name. Ugh, shadows. Don't think I'm criticizing you. Gods, no. I'd probably be exactly the same. Sometimes I imagine myself in your age, desperately trying to write philosophical Instagram captions. Seek the form of the good, but also remember to hydrate. I'd have been a complete disaster at it. Sometimes I wonder if Socrates would have had a TikTok account. 30-second videos of him walking up to strangers asking, "Are you sure you know what courage is?" He'd have gone viral, and probably been banned. Shadows. But jokes aside, I know how hard it is when your mind refuses to shut up. When the cave's shadows loom so large you feel you'll never see the sun again. So, let me share one more story. There was a young man in Athens, smart, articulate, full of potential, but terrified of what people thought. He feared ridicule, feared he wasn't wise enough, feared he'd waste his life. He'd show up at my door in the middle of the night, eyes wide as saucers, asking, "Plato, how do I know if I'm living the right way?" And I'd tell him the same thing I'll tell you right now. Sometimes the right way is just to keep moving forward, even if it's tiny steps, to breathe, to look for the light, to remember that the shadows on the wall aren't the whole truth. Ugh, shadows. The night makes everything look bigger. It turns your doubts into dragons, but those dragons shrink in the daylight. One trick I learned on my own sleepless nights was to talk gently to my thoughts, not to fight them, not to wrestle shadows into submission, but to say, "Hey, I see you. Thanks for trying to keep me safe. But right now, I'm okay. I can rest." Maybe you could try that next time the shadows roar. Another thing I'd do was step outside, feel the cool breeze, look up at the stars, each one a tiny torch burning in the vast dark. I'd remind myself how small my fears were compared to the cosmic dance above. Sometimes I'd find Socrates outside too, standing there like a philosophical gargoyle. Once I asked, "Socrates, are you pondering great truths?" And he sighed and said, "No. I'm trying to remember if I paid the olive seller yesterday." Ugh, shadows. We are all human. Even philosophers forget to pay for olives. So, if your mind insists on dragging you back into the cave tonight, be gentle with yourself. The shadows can't hurt you. They're just shapes on a wall. And if you can, step outside. Or close your eyes and imagine stars. Hear the sea whispering against marble. Smell fig leaves and wood smoke. Let yourself remember that life is bigger than your thoughts. I once said a true philosopher loves truth more than comfort. But I'll tell you a secret. Even philosophers crave comfort sometimes. A breeze, a warm fire, a gentle voice in the dark. So let this be my gentle voice for you tonight. The cave won't last forever. The chains will fall away. The shadows will fade. And outside the cave's mouth, a world of color and laughter waits. So breathe with me now. In and out. Listen to the hush between the crackles of the fire. Let the stars stand guard above you. And remember, even if sleep feels impossibly far away, you're not alone in the cave. Because even the longest night has a dawn. Still not asleep? That's perfectly fine. Seriously. Ugh, shadows. I've always believed the night belongs to thinkers, dreamers, and people whose brains refuse to shut the hell up no matter how many herbal teas they've guzzled. Tell me, how are you feeling tonight? Are your eyes getting heavy, or is your mind still tap dancing through existential crises while counting worries instead of sheep? Either way, I'm glad you're here. Stay as long as you want. Drift in and out if you must. The fire's crackling away like it's telling secrets, and I've got plenty left to say. So let me lob a question at you. A question that's been rattling around in my skull since the dawn of my chin fuzz. What is real? I know. It sounds simple. Almost silly. Like something a stoned college kid would ask at 2 a.m. while eating leftover souvlaki. But here's the thing. Tug that one little thread, and the entire tapestry of your life starts unraveling like a cheap toga. Ugh. Shadows. I can't even count how many afternoons I spent wandering the agora with Socrates, dust swirling around our feet, merchants yelling about olives, and Socrates jabbing me in the chest, going, "Plato, is that wall real, or just the idea of a wall?" Then he'd vanish into the crowd, leaving me standing there arguing with bricks. See, here's the trouble. Everything you see, touch, smell, hear, it all feels solid, concrete, like your grandma's baklava recipe. But I've always believed that what you perceive is just the tip of the cosmic iceberg. Just shadows, hints, glimpses of something far bigger and shinier lurking behind the curtain. I called those eternal blueprints the forms of beauty, the form of justice, the form of the good. Perfect cosmic templates that don't crack, rot, or go out of fashion. The real reality. Picture this. You imagine a perfect circle. Smooth. Flawless. No wobbly edges. Then try drawing it in sand. Ha! The grains betray you. Your hand shakes. Your perfect circle ends up looking like a tragic pita bread. But inside your mind, you still know what perfection looks like. Your soul holds the memory, crisp and clear. That's the forms talking. It's like there's another world stitched into ours, a realm where beauty never wrinkles, where truth doesn't buckle under pressure, where love doesn't ghost you after 3 dates. We live in the echoes of that place, like people pressed against a door, eavesdropping on a party we're not quite invited to. Shadows. When I was young, I'd lie awake at night, staring into the darkness, thinking, is any of this real? Was Athens real? The marble temples glowing in the sun? The chatter echoing off stone walls? Or were we all actors trapped in a cosmic improv show, forgetting our lines as we go along? Sometimes those thoughts kept me awake until the roosters lost their patience. Because here's what's terrifying about the question. If everything we see is shadows, then what does that make us? Are we shadows too? Fleeting flickers on a cosmic cave wall? Or is there something permanent and luminous inside us, shining even when our bodies turn to dust? I wrestled with that thought like a drunken wrestler at a Dionysian festival. I'd watch the sun crawl over Athens's rooftops, turning the sky from purple to gold, and ask myself, is this sunrise real, or just the form of light poking through the veil? Most people thought I was ridiculous. Plato, a loaf of bread is real enough, and that's what matters. Fair point. You can't butter the form of bread and call it breakfast. Ugh, shadows. But I couldn't let it go. Because sometimes in those hush, quiet moments, I felt something shimmering behind the everyday world. A silent whisper saying, "Look deeper." And I'm betting you've felt it too. That shiver of wonder when music makes goosebumps explode across your skin. Or when you stare into someone's eyes and feel like you've known them since the dawn of time, or at least since high school geometry class. Or when you stand under a sky blazing with stars and feel tiny, yet somehow infinite. Those moments, my friend, are glimpses of the forms, little slivers of sunlight filtering into the cave. Ugh, shadows. Of course, Socrates would say, "Plato, how can you prove any of this?" And I'd groan because, with him, every conversation was an inquisition. He'd keep hammering you with questions until your brain felt like a pile of warm hummus. But he wasn't wrong, because reality is slippery. It shifts shape the moment you try to grab it, like olive oil sliding off a plate. Look at your own world. You've got social media, news feeds, videos looping until your soul weeps. Filters that turn reality into something smoother, shinier, curated to within an inch of its life. People posting perfect breakfasts, perfect sunsets, perfect relationships. Meanwhile, those same people can't sleep at night because they're haunted by the same monsters you are. Modern life is just another cave. A screen glowing in the darkness, throwing flickering shadows on your walls. And sometimes, it's so hard to remember that anything exists beyond that glow. Don't get me wrong. Shadows can be beautiful. Art is a shadow, in a way. Poetry, too. Even these words I'm murmuring at you right now are shadows. Echoes of ideas burning bright in my mind. The danger comes when we mistake the shadows for the whole story. Ugh, shadows. Because there's always something more. A hidden depth beneath the surface. A sun waiting to rise beyond the cave's stone mouth. So tonight, as you lie there listening, maybe half asleep, maybe wide-eyed and vibrating with existential dread, I want you to remember this. Even if your world feels blurry, unreal, flickering like a bad connection, there's still a spark of something eternal inside you. That part of you that loves, hopes, wonders. That's the realest thing of all. Let's keep digging into this together. I have plenty more to say about beauty, truth, and those sneaky shadows that keep trying to drag us back into the cave. But remember this. Even shadows are part of the story. Sometimes they're what help us find the light. There's another big misunderstanding people have about my philosophy. They think I'm anti-world, that I scorn the senses, that I'd rather be floating through the cosmos high-fiving the forms than touching warm stone or biting into a perfect fig. Total nonsense. I love beauty. I love laughter. I love the crunch of bread fresh from the oven, the burst of salt when you bite an olive, the sound of a lyre drifting across a courtyard at twilight, the hush that blankets Athens just as the stars wake up. The world of the senses is precious, but for me, it's only the beginning. A doorway, the shimmer on the surface of a deeper ocean. The taste of honey is a tiny hint of sweetness itself. Firelight flickering on stone is a clue about the nature of light. Everything physical is a sign pointing towards something eternal. Ugh, shadows. Once, when I was young, I sat by the harbor. Ships rocked gently, lanterns swaying. The sea smelled of salt and pine pitch. A breeze lifted the corner of my cloak, and for an instant I felt like I was glimpsing a cosmic thread stitching together the boats, the stars above, and the chaos spinning inside my skull. It was gone in a blink. But that's how the forms reveal themselves. Quick sparks, gentle whispers that say, "Look deeper." Of course, most people in Athens rolled their eyes so hard I worried about permanent damage. They'd say, "Plato, life's already complicated. Why poke it with sticks?" I get it. You can't roast a chicken over the form of fire. You can't snuggle up under the form of blanket. But even those no-nonsense Athenians sometimes stared up at the stars and wondered if there was more. I believe even the most practical soul feels the tug of something beyond the mundane. Maybe it happens when you read words so sharp and beautiful they slice your heart open. Or when a song lifts you out of yourself. Or when you hold someone you love and time stops cold. Those moments, they're your soul brushing against eternity. The shadows parting for a heartbeat to let you glimpse the blazing light behind them. Ugh, shadows. And it's not just beauty that opens the door to the forms. Sometimes sorrow does too. I've seen men weep at funerals, then in the depths of their grief discover a clarity they'd never known. A fierce love for the life that remains. A sudden knowledge of what actually matters. Even pain can teach us that there's something larger than ourselves. Something worth seeking. Socrates used to say, "A question is a door. You don't have to walk through, but you should at least peek in." And I'd laugh because with Socrates, one question was never enough. He'd fire 50 more at you before breakfast. Once, he stopped me mid-sentence in the agora and said, "Plato, how do you know you're not dreaming right now?" Then he just wandered off, leaving me there blinking at the sun, wondering if the olives in my hand were real, or just figments of a cosmic power nap. Ugh, shadows. Are you still awake, my friend? Or floating somewhere between thoughts and sleep? Either way, it's okay. Sometimes the clearest wisdom comes when logic softens, when your mind loosens its grip and lets your soul drift free. I often think your modern world would make Socrates either ecstatic or absolutely bonkers. So many voices clamoring for your attention. Notifications, advertisements, infinite scrolls. It's shadows on shadows on shadows. And yet, the same question remains. What is real? Because behind every perfect selfie, there's a person wondering if they're enough. Behind every online rant, there's a human terrified of being invisible. Behind every glossy advertisement, there's a hunger for meaning, for love, for connection. Your age hasn't escaped the cave. It's just decorated the walls differently. New fires, new shadows, but shadows all the same. Ugh, shadows. And that's why I'm sitting here with you tonight. Not to yank you out of your world, but to remind you that beyond the shadows, there's always a brighter light. You don't have to reject joy, or laughter, or good bread. The forms don't demand we become solemn marble busts. Quite the opposite. They're the reason laughter exists. They're why music makes you shiver, why a sunrise feels like hope. The forms aren't a rejection of life. They're life's hidden melody. So when you lie awake wondering if any of this matters, remember, the fact that you're even asking proves the brilliance of your soul. Shadows can't question themselves. Only something luminous can wonder about truth. Ugh, shadows. And if sleep still hovers just out of reach tonight, let that remind you that your mind is alive, curious, restless in the best possible way. So breathe with me again, in and out. Feel the air slip into your chest. Cool, gentle. Listen for the hush between my words. Let it soothe you like moonlight pouring over marble steps. You don't have to solve the mysteries of the cosmos before dawn. It's enough, sometimes, just to wonder, to keep peeking beyond the shadows, because they may dance on your walls. But beyond them, always, there's something real. And you, my friend, are part of that shining reality. Another hour deeper into the night, and we're still here together. I love that, truly. Love has kept many of us awake at night. Sometimes it's the memory of a laugh. Sometimes it's wondering whether a certain message will ever come. Either way, come closer. Let's talk about love. You might think a philosopher like me wouldn't bother with love, that I'd spend my nights pondering justice, or perfect triangles, or how to run an ideal city. And yes, I've done my fair share of that. But let me tell you a secret. Love has always been my greatest curiosity, because it's the most human and the most divine thing we experience. It's the one force that pulls us beyond the shadows on the wall, toward something higher. Let me take you back to a night in Athens, a symposium. A word that sounds fancy, but really it was just a bunch of philosophers drinking wine and trying to outdo each other with speeches about love. Picture cushions scattered on the floor, flickering oil lamps, the smell of sweet resin smoke curling through the air, silver cups brimming with dark wine, laughter, slurred words, philosophers half arguing, half flirting. And there, among them, was Socrates, my teacher, my friend, sometimes my torment. He sat barefoot as usual, cloak slipping off one shoulder, eyes bright and utterly sober despite the endless refills. When it was his turn to speak, he didn't flatter anyone with pretty poetry. Instead, he spoke of Eros, the god of love, as a ladder. A ladder, he said, that starts with physical attraction, a beautiful face, a graceful body, the way someone's voice makes you feel awake and alive. But if you're wise, you don't stop there. You climb higher. From loving one body, you learn to love beauty itself wherever you find it. In thoughts, in souls, in music, in laws, in the order of the cosmos. Love leads you upward, rung by rung, until finally you glimpse the form of beauty itself, pure, unchanging, beyond flesh, beyond time. It was brilliant, and annoyingly it made perfect sense. Even the drunken poets stopped laughing to listen. I remember sitting there, swirling wine in my cup, thinking that love might just be the bridge between this world and the world of the forms. It's the force that pulls our hearts beyond the cave. That makes us suspect there's something bigger than our own lonely shadows. But let's be honest. Love isn't always so noble. Even in Athens, it could be messy, ridiculous, and occasionally catastrophic. I saw men compose flowery poems for women who barely knew their names. I saw young men duel with words, and sometimes with actual swords, over glances and gossip. I saw entire families torn apart because someone fell in love with precisely the wrong person. And Socrates. Oh, Socrates wasn't immune either. Once, during that same symposium, he got so carried away talking about love that he forgot to drink at all. By dawn, everyone else was passed out on couches, and there was Socrates, still explaining how Eros drives the soul toward wisdom. Completely sober, completely unstoppable. The man could out-talk Dionysus himself. Even today, your world is full of love's chaos. You've got dating apps where people swipe left and right, hoping to find the form of the good in a profile picture. You've got movies where people confess love in the rain, as though storms are required for romance. You've got songs that make your chest ache because they echo a feeling you thought was yours alone. And behind all of it, the same question echoes in the dark. What is love, really? To me, love is the soul's way of remembering what it once knew. It's the ache for perfection we've glimpsed only in flashes. The yearning for a unity we can't quite touch, but somehow feel is possible. It's the whisper that says there's more. But here's the danger. Sometimes we chase shadows instead of reality. We fall in love with an image, with an idea, with a version of someone we've built in our minds. We ignore the truth because the fantasy feels so much safer. I've seen it 1,000 times. In Athens, people wrote poems to lovers they'd only spoken to once. They mistook physical beauty for virtue. They thought passion alone would save them from loneliness. And when reality arrived, messy, human, imperfect, they felt betrayed. But real love lives in imperfection. It sees the flaws and stays anyway. It's not just the thrill of a glance across the room. It's sitting with someone in silence, knowing you're safe there. It's forgiving. It's gentle. Sometimes it's hilariously awkward. And yet, it's the closest thing we have to touching the divine. I think that's why insomnia and love go hand in hand. Because love makes the mind restless. You replay conversations. You imagine futures. You wonder if the feelings are mutual, or if you're alone in the glow of your affection. Love stirs up every fear and every hope all at once. It's the sweetest kind of chaos. Socrates would say that's precisely the point. He believed love exists to wound us a little, to remind us we're incomplete. So we'll keep searching, keep reaching higher, keep questioning. In that way, love makes philosophers of us all. Maybe that's why, even in your age of endless distractions, love still rules the night. No matter how many apps you invent, no matter how fast your notifications ping, the human heart keeps asking the same ancient questions. Does someone see me? Do I matter? Can love save me from my own shadows? I wish I could promise you simple answers, but love is not simple. It's not always tidy or safe, but it's always worth exploring. Because every time you love, truly love, you inch closer to something real, something eternal. So tonight, if your mind is spinning with thoughts of someone's eyes or a voice you can't forget, know this: you're not foolish. You're human, and your longing is proof that your soul remembers the stars. Love is a riddle, a flame that warms or burns, depending on how close you stand. Even I, Plato, couldn't write one perfect definition. Believe me, I tried. But every time I thought I'd captured it, love slipped away like water through my fingers. In Athens, people would come to me seeking wisdom about love. They'd ask, Plato, how do I know if it's true love? And I'd answer, well, are you seeking just pleasure, or something that lifts your soul? Which, as you can imagine, was not always the answer they wanted. Because let's be honest, sometimes people don't want wisdom. They just want the person they love to text them back. I saw love drive people to poetry, heroism, and acts of astonishing kindness. But I also saw love drive people to madness, jealousy, and heartbreak. It's the same force, wearing different masks. Socrates used to say love was divine madness, both a gift from the gods and a dangerous storm if you're not prepared. He believed love forces us to see beyond ourselves, to glimpse beauty we didn't know existed, and that beauty makes us want to become worthy of it. We strive to grow, to learn, to polish our souls until they shine a little closer to the divine. But love can also trap us, because the shadows of the cave love to disguise themselves as the real thing. We fall for illusions, the idea of the perfect partner, the fantasy of a flawless relationship, the belief that love alone will fix everything broken inside us. I watched it happen in Athens. I see it happening in your world. People fall in love with the idea of being loved, rather than loving someone else in truth. They mistake intensity for depth. They think constant butterflies mean eternal connection, instead of realizing that sometimes love grows quiet and steady, like embers glowing under ash. Real love doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it's making sure someone eats when they're too sad to cook. Sometimes it's listening to a story you've heard 100 times because it matters to the person telling it. Sometimes it's letting someone go when you know you're not what they need. That, to me, is love climbing the ladder Socrates described. From physical desire, up to admiration of the soul, and finally toward the form of beauty itself. The pure idea of love, shining beyond bodies and time. Of course, don't think I'm dismissing earthly love. Far from it. There's magic in a single touch, in the hush between two people who understand each other without words, in the laughter that makes you forget the world for a moment. Those moments are sacred. They're the shadows of the eternal, playing on the walls of your life. Even the awkwardness is beautiful. Trust me, I've witnessed some painfully awkward romantic confessions. Once, at a party in Athens, a young man stood up, raised his cup, and proclaimed his undying love for a woman across the room, who promptly left to get more olives and never came back. He sat down, red as a pomegranate. The entire room tried not to laugh. Even Socrates smirked into his wine. But you know what? Even that humiliation was part of love's teaching. Because love humbles us. It reminds us we're not invincible, that our hearts are fragile, and that fragility, it's what makes us human. Modern love has its own rituals, swiping left or right, reading someone's entire online presence to see if their playlist aligns with yours, crafting the perfect message, deleting it, rewriting it, deleting it again, waiting for those 3 little dots to appear, praying they don't vanish before the reply comes. I imagine if I lived today, I'd be terrible at dating apps. My bio would read, philosopher, obsessed with metaphysics, partial to olives, looking for someone who believes shadows aren't reality. I suspect I wouldn't get many matches. Yet, beneath the modern tools, love hasn't changed. You still ache to be seen, to be understood, to be chosen. You still search for that spark that makes your chest tighten and your mind race. That's not just biology. That's your soul remembering the forms. Socrates said that love teaches us about our own incompleteness, that we're always searching for our missing half. But I think the truth is even more beautiful. I believe love doesn't just fill a gap, it expands us. It makes us capable of tenderness we didn't know we possessed. It calls us out of our caves and into the sunlight. Even the love that doesn't last leaves behind something precious, a memory, a lesson, a glimpse of beauty that lingers long after the person is gone. I've loved and lost, too. The sting fades, but the wisdom remains. So if tonight your heart feels heavy, if you're replaying old conversations or longing for someone who isn't beside you, be gentle with yourself. You're not broken. You're human. Love has always been the most dangerous and the most rewarding journey. It lifts us toward the stars, even as it reminds us how far we still have to climb. And though it sometimes wounds us, it also heals. It shows us how deeply we're capable of feeling, how infinite the soul truly is. So breathe with me now, in and out. Let the memories come and go like waves. Let your heart soften. You don't have to have all the answers tonight, because even love's confusion is part of the beauty. And one day, the shadows will part, and you'll see clearly why every tear, every laugh, every sleepless night was worth it. Everything passes, my friend, even longing, even heartbreak. And beyond it all, love remains. Always. The night has grown quieter, hasn't it? Or maybe it's just that our minds are a little calmer after talking about love. Although, if you want a guaranteed way to get your pulse racing again and wreck your chances of sleep, I've got just the topic for you. Politics. I know, you're probably groaning already. But don't worry. I'll keep it gentle. No shouting. No surprise votes. No one's going to storm the agora halfway through this conversation. At least, I hope not. Because if there's one thing I learned in Athens, it's this. Politics is messy. Messier than spilled wine. Messier than trying to explain Socrates to your drunk uncle. And despite how much I love philosophy, politics broke my heart. Let me tell you why. I grew up loving Athens with all my soul. I thought it was the shining jewel of the world. Marble temples glowing in the sun. Poets reciting verses in crowded squares. Sculptors chiseling gods out of cold stone. The smell of roasted barley and olive oil in the air. The sea glimmering in the distance like a promise. We were supposed to be the freest, wisest people on earth. The inventors of democracy. The ones who decided together how to live. But here's the thing. We might have invented democracy, but we were also incredibly bad at it. Don't get me wrong. Athenians loved to vote. We'd vote on everything. Should we go to war? Vote. Should we build a new temple? Vote. Should we execute a famous philosopher for allegedly corrupting the youth? Vote. And the answer was often yes. I remember once we held a vote on whether to execute entire captured cities of people. One day, the assembly shouted, "Kill them all." The next day, we sobered up and went, "Wait, maybe let's not." So we held another vote. Total chaos. Athens was democracy on espresso shots, loud, passionate, and prone to extremely bad decisions. People think mob mentality is a modern thing. Social media, online mobs, hashtags. But let me tell you, we had cancel culture in Athens too. We just scratched our insults into clay tablets instead of posting them on Twitter. We had fake news too. Ours just traveled on foot, or by ship, or was scratched into bits of pottery. But it worked the same way. Someone would shout, I heard Alcibiades is plotting with Sparta. And before you knew it, half the city wanted him exiled, and the other half wanted him to lead the navy. It was exhausting. I'd stand there in the agora, surrounded by citizens yelling over each other, and I'd think, this is supposed to be the height of human wisdom. Socrates, of course, thought it was hilarious. He'd wander around poking people with questions like, how do you know who's wise enough to lead? And is popularity the same as virtue? Meanwhile, people were trying to buy olives in peace. He once asked a politician, if you wouldn't trust this man to shoe your horse, why would you trust him to govern your city? And the man sputtered so hard, he dropped his entire amphora of oil. People either adored Socrates or wanted him to disappear into the Aegean Sea. There was very little middle ground, and eventually they decided to make him disappear. That trial broke something inside me. They dragged Socrates into court and accused him of corrupting the youth and not believing in the city's gods, which, ironically, is exactly what he was doing. But still, did he deserve death for it? He stood there in front of the jurors, calmly telling them that killing him wouldn't solve anything, that they'd only be silencing the voice that reminded them how little they knew, and they voted to kill him anyway. Sometimes I still hear his voice in the dark, asking questions no one wants to answer. I walked away from that trial feeling disgusted, betrayed by the city I loved. I realized that democracy, for all its beauty, can become just another shadow on the wall. People shouting opinions doesn't automatically create truth. Crowds can be wise, but they can also be cruel, fickle, afraid, and fear makes people do terrible things. After Socrates died, Athens fell apart. We lost wars. We fought each other. Tyrants came and went. One minute we were chanting freedom and glory. The next minute we were handing power to whichever group promised to keep us safe. I'd see men I once admired bending their knees to new rulers, selling out their friends to avoid exile, writing speeches praising whoever was in power this week. We called ourselves free, but half the time we were prisoners of fear. So I started writing about a different kind of city, a city ruled by philosopher kings. I know. You're rolling your eyes. A philosopher in charge sounds like a terrible idea. I get it. Philosophers are notoriously bad at parties, remember? And we'd probably spend council meetings debating the metaphysical properties of spoons. But I wasn't trying to be a tyrant. I just wanted a city where leaders cared more about truth than about popularity. A place where decisions were based on wisdom, not whoever shouted the loudest. Because the older I got, the more I realized. It's easy for shadows of tyranny to slip in. You think you're safe. You think democracy will protect you. Then fear comes. War comes. People start looking for strong men with easy answers, and the next thing you know, you're living in chains. Sometimes tyranny doesn't even look scary at first. It promises security. It promises prosperity. It says, don't worry, let us think for you. But that's just another cave. Another set of shadows. Look at your own time. You've got leaders who promise to fix everything, to make people safe, to make things great again, to build walls, to tear walls down, to silence the press, to speak only the truth. And sometimes those promises sound very sweet when you're scared. But remember, friend, cities fall, men pass, everything passes. No matter how powerful a leader seems, they are dust in the wind. Their speech is ayo for a moment, then vanish. Marble crumbles. Empires fade. Athens was the greatest city in the world, and we lost our freedom. Rome rose and fell. So did Persia. So did Macedon. Shadows on the cave wall. So what does all this mean for you, lying awake at night, scrolling through news apps, your chest tight with worry? First, breathe. In and out. Because here's the truth. Politics is important, but it's not everything. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying ignore injustice or stay silent when leaders do wrong. That's how tyranny takes root. But I am saying, keep your soul free. Because no matter who rules your city, no one owns your thoughts. Your mind is your own. Your conscience is your own. Socrates once said, "No harm can come to a good man, either in life or after death." And I believe that. They can exile you. They can smear your name on clay tablets or internet posts. They can take your wealth, your job, your social standing, but they cannot take the part of you that loves truth, that feels beauty, that laughs at absurdity, that questions everything. That part is yours. Always. So, yes, I became disillusioned with politics. I saw how quickly democracy can turn into a mob, how tyrants can rise from fear, how truth can get trampled under slogans and chants. But I also believe in the human soul. I believe in moments of courage, in quiet acts of conscience, in the power of one voice asking, why? Even when the city is roaring with anger. So if you're awake tonight, worried about your world, remember this. History moves in cycles. Crowds shout. Leaders rise and fall. Empires crumble. But the sun keeps rising. The stars keep shining. And the soul, searching for truth, outlives every tyrant. So breathe with me again. In and out. Let the shadows pass, because even the longest night has a dawn. Tell me, how's your mind right now? Feeling more calm after my monologue? Or is it still bouncing around like a squirrel who found an amphora of honey wine? Either way, I'm glad you're still here. Because now I want to talk about something that's been rattling around in my skull for ages. The soul, or, as I sometimes call it, the world's tiniest three-ring circus. Ugh. Shadows. Look, I know the word soul sounds heavy, like something you only talk about during deep philosophical debates or while lying in the dark at 3 a.m., staring at your ceiling fan. But trust me, it's not all mystical nonsense. Well, it kind of is. But I'll try to keep it less painful than an all-night argument with Socrates. Let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like there's an entire committee living inside your skull? Like part of you wants to go to bed because you're exhausted. Another part wants one more cookie. And a third part suddenly decides you absolutely must reorganize your bookshelf by color at 4 a.m. Congratulations. That's your soul, Plato style. I used to picture the soul like a chariot. A gleaming chariot flying under the stars, pulled by 3 horses. One horse is noble, elegant, dignified, head high, mane flowing. That's your reason. The part of you that seeks truth, wisdom, justice, and, ideally, a decent bedtime. Then there's the second horse. Fiery, wild-eyed, snorting sparks. That's your spirit. The part of you that loves courage, pride, and standing up for yourself. The part that wants to win arguments and might yell in the market if your olive vendor tries to shortchange you. And then there's the third horse. The one drooling slightly. The one who eyes every bakery stall and whispers, "Hey, you definitely need that glow-in-the-dark rubber duck right now." That's appetite. Your cravings, your desires. The bit of your soul that's basically a raccoon rummaging for leftover baklava. All 3 horses want to go somewhere, but they rarely agree on the destination. And guess who's stuck holding the reins? Yep, you. Good luck with that. Sometimes reason pulls you towards studying or meditation or inner peace. Spirit's yanking you toward defending your honor or winning some online debate. And appetite's screaming, I want honey cakes and a cuddle right now. And so, your chariot wobbles along, sometimes soaring gracefully under the stars, sometimes veering into philosophical potholes. Now, let's bring it into your modern world. Your reason wants sleep. Your spirit wants to prove that random stranger on Reddit totally misunderstood Aristotle. And your appetite is still scrolling TikTok, giggling at a guy making feta pasta at 4 a.m. Sound familiar? Ugh. Shadows. Socrates used to say the key to happiness was keeping those horses in balance. He'd tell me, Plato, a man ruled entirely by appetite is like a drunk sailor trying to steer a ship through a storm. And I'd say, Socrates, can we just finish lunch before we start discussing moral shipwrecks? And he'd say, no, Plato. The olives can wait. Which, by the way, they could not. But he wasn't wrong. Appetite isn't evil. Desire isn't evil. The hunger for pleasure, comfort, beauty, that's part of being human. It's only when appetite grabs the reins entirely that things get messy. Trust me. I've seen otherwise intelligent men ruin their lives over gambling, or political power, or trying to impress someone with a poem containing 17 references to figs. And spirit. Oh, spirit can be noble. The drive to defend justice. The thrill of standing up for yourself. But it can also turn into rage, into pride so sharp it slices friendships to ribbons. I've watched men go to war because someone accidentally stepped on their sandal in the agora. And reason. Well, reason is supposed to be the calm driver of the soul. But even reason can become cold, detached, so obsessed with abstract truths that it forgets the warmth of simply living. I mean, look at me. I once spent an entire week lying awake, trying to decide whether numbers exist independently of physical objects. Meanwhile, the olive harvest was happening outside and I missed all the good snacks. Ugh, shadows. Balance. That's the secret. The charioteer, the you inside you, is meant to keep all three horses working together, not killing each other. So let me ask you, which horse has the reins tonight? Is it your reason, gently urging you towards sleep and peace? Or your spirit, replaying that snarky comment your boss made last week? Or appetite, insisting that yes, dumplings are an absolutely necessary life choice at 2:47 a.m.? I'm not judging. I've had nights where spirit was ready to challenge half of Athens to a debate, and appetite was sobbing for honey cakes, while reason had simply left the building. Even Socrates struggled with his horses sometimes. Once I found him standing motionless in the agora, staring at a fig tree for 6 hours. When I finally asked him what he was thinking about, he sighed and said, I can't decide whether I'm hungry or pondering the mortality of the human condition. Same, Socrates. Same. The reason I love this image of the chariot is because it reminds me that even when I feel pulled in 1,000 directions, that doesn't mean I'm broken. It just means I'm human. Your soul isn't chaos because you're failing. It's chaos because it's trying to steer you toward the good. Each part wants something important. Appetite wants pleasure and survival. Spirit wants honor and courage. Reason wants truth and understanding. All good things. They just need a driver who doesn't let any single horse drag the chariot off a cliff. And here's the beautiful part. Even when your horses are tearing off in opposite directions, You can always take back the reins. You can pause, breathe, listen for that quiet voice of reason. You can soothe your spirit instead of letting it set the entire agora on fire. You can satisfy appetite without letting it run the whole show. And on nights like this one, when sleep feels miles away, that might be the best gift you give yourself. Because your soul is vast. It's more than your cravings, more than your pride, more than your thoughts. It's the place where love, wonder, and beauty live. It's the part of you that looks up at the stars and whispers, "There's more." And yes, everything passes, even this night. Shadows. I promise you, my friend, the dawn will come. So breathe with me now, in and out. Picture your soul as that shining chariot under the stars. Let your reason gather the reins. Let your spirit lift its head high. Let your appetite relax, content in the knowledge that there will always be honey cakes tomorrow. Because even if your horses are a little wild tonight, you're still the driver, and everything passes, even this night. The night feels softer now, doesn't it? Maybe it's just me. Or maybe the stars are leaning in, curious about our conversation. Shadows. So, let's change scenery a bit. Let me take you to a place that held my heart for decades. A place of dusty sandals, laughter under leafy trees, and the sound of pebbles crunching underfoot. My school, the academy, or, as I sometimes call it, the original co-working space. I know you've got universities, business schools, LinkedIn, online courses, and apps that teach you Mandarin while you brush your teeth. But back in my day, we had the academy. You've got LinkedIn, I had the academy. Slightly fewer profile pictures, slightly more debates about whether reality exists. Picture this: a grove of towering plane trees, their branches arching overhead like green canopies. Gravel paths winding through dappled sunlight. Cicadas humming lazily in the heat. A soft breeze carrying the smell of olive leaves and dust. And scattered under the trees, groups of people deep in conversation. Some sprawled on benches, others pacing in circles, gesturing wildly as they argue about whether justice is one thing or many. Admittedly, our TED Talks sometimes went on for 8 hours, and there were no slides, unless you count me doodling diagrams in the dirt with a stick. The academy was my safe place, my refuge from the chaos of politics. After all the noise of the agora, I craved somewhere calmer. A place where questions could stretch their limbs and breathe. A place where ideas weren't shouted over one another, but gently explored like fragile seashells held up to the light. But don't imagine it was all solemn faces and solemn voices. We laughed a lot. Oh, believe me, philosophers can be ridiculous. I mean, you try keeping a straight face while someone earnestly insists that numbers have feelings. Or while Socrates interrupts your lecture to ask whether your sandals exist independently of your feet. Some days, we'd start discussing justice, and somehow end up debating whether roasted octopus counted as virtuous living. And I'll be honest, there were moments when even I wanted to run screaming into the olive groves. Shadows. But that's the thing. Philosophy isn't just abstract thoughts floating around like wisps of smoke. It's rooted in life, in arguments, in laughter, in gravel dust on your cloak. I built the academy because I wanted a place where people could gather without fear. A place where you could say, "I don't know," and nobody would sneer. It was open to anyone who loved wisdom. Men, young and old. Occasionally, the odd Spartan who wandered in by mistake and left thoroughly confused. We had no tuition fees, no diplomas, Our currency was curiosity, the only entrance requirement, a burning desire to ask why. Of course, people still gossiped about us. Some Athenians thought we were suspicious, a group of men talking for hours under trees, clearly plotting something, right? Or possibly worshiping strange new gods, or just avoiding honest work. And look, it's not like we were very subtle. We had this way of standing around in togas, staring into space, mumbling things like, "What is virtue?" or "Does the soul weigh anything?" Admittedly, we weren't the best at small talk. The academy wasn't just my home. It was my attempt to keep alive the spirit of Socrates, to protect the questions that cost him his life. Socrates taught me that wisdom begins with knowing how little we know, and that the best way to seek truth is together. 2 minds clashing, sparking ideas, or 10 minds, each tossing questions into the middle like pebbles into a pond. So that's what we did, day after day. Under those plane trees, we wrestled with the biggest mysteries of existence. Is justice the same for everyone? Does beauty exist apart from beautiful things? What makes a good life? Why does my brain insist on pondering the forms when I'm trying to nap? Shadows. Sometimes our debates were gentle. Other times it was like verbal wrestling. I'd be explaining my theory of the soul, and someone would shout, "But Plato, what if you're just dreaming all of this?" And suddenly I'd be stuck defending the reality of fig trees, while everyone else argued about the possibility that we're all just brains floating in cosmic soup. And yes, I know you've heard modern versions of these questions. Your age hasn't escaped philosophy. You've got podcasts, viral tweets, think pieces, coffee shop debates, endless Reddit threads arguing about whether we're living in a simulation. You've got digital academies scattered across the internet. People teaching and learning, sometimes brilliantly, sometimes just yelling in all caps. But the spirit's the same. You're still asking, what's real? What's true? Why are we here? That's why I'm never entirely pessimistic. Even in the midst of chaos, I believe humans can't help but ask questions. It's built into us, like our craving for honey cakes, or the desire to peek over the next hill. At the academy, I watched young men transform. They'd arrive cocky, certain they knew everything. 6 months later, they'd be wandering around murmuring, "I know that I know nothing," while furiously scribbling notes about virtue, courage, and the immortal soul. We didn't just discuss philosophy. We talked politics, poetry, mathematics, astronomy. One of my students once spent an entire summer calculating how big the Earth was, just because he wondered how far the horizon really stretched. Another got obsessed with figuring out how music worked, measuring the intervals between notes until the rest of us begged him to stop singing scales in the courtyard. Your world might be faster, shinier, noisier, but the same questions still whisper through your nights. Who am I? What is truth? How do I live well? You might call it personal development, self-care, life coaching. I called it philosophy. Same thing, different toga. Sometimes, when I lie awake, I think about those plane trees rustling in the breeze. I see sunlight dancing on dust motes. I hear the crunch of sandals on gravel. I remember young voices arguing, laughing, questioning. And I feel hope. Because even though Athens has crumbled, the academy lives on anywhere humans gather to wonder. Anywhere someone leans forward and says, "But why?" Anywhere someone whispers, "There must be more." And that's why, my friend, I'm talking to you tonight, because you're part of that same lineage. A night owl philosopher, asking your questions in the dark. Don't ever let anyone tell you curiosity is foolish, or that wonder is a waste of time. It's the spark that keeps the soul alive. So if you're lying there, eyes half closing, wondering whether any of this matters, remember the plane trees, remember the breeze, remember the laughter drifting through leaves, and remember this: everything passes, even this night. But truth and wonder and the yearning to know, those things endure, always. So breathe with me, in and out. So, you're still awake, my friend. I can't decide if that makes me a terrible philosopher or an excellent one. Ugh, shadows. I mean, half the goal here was to help you drift off, and yet the other half was to keep you company in the dark, whispering secrets that maybe you didn't even know you needed to hear. And there's one last secret I've been saving for now. A secret wrapped in fear, mystery, and the hush that comes over even the rowdiest crowd. Death. Yeah, I said it. Stay with me. Don't flinch. I promise I won't get too spooky. Take a breath, in and out. Because death, for me, has never been just an ending. It's a doorway, a curtain drawn back, a change of scene in the great theater of existence. People hear my name and assume, oh great, here comes Plato with his gloom and doom lectures about mortality. But let me set the record straight. I never wanted philosophy to be morbid. If anything, I wanted it to help people look at death and say, all right, I'm still terrified, but maybe there's more to this than endless darkness. You fear death. So did we. But night always surrenders to dawn. I used to lie awake on stone floors in Athens, staring at the ceiling, feeling my own heartbeat echo in my ears, wondering, what happens when the body goes still? Do we blink out like a lantern snuffed in the wind? Or is there something that slips free, a spark, a soul that carries on into some hidden realm? Ugh, shadows. Even I, Mr. Forms and Eternal Truths, had moments of shivering doubt. Because, let's face it, the unknown is a scary place, no matter how many philosophical diagrams you scratch in the dust with a stick. But then there was Socrates, the original barefoot troublemaker. He changed everything for me. Let me take you back to one of the hardest days of my life. The day Athens decided to silence him forever. The courtroom was hot and stifling, full of nervous coughs and the sound of robes shifting. You could practically taste the fear in the air. Socrates stood there, looking like he'd just wandered in off the street, cloak all crooked, one sandal half untied, utterly unfazed. He spoke with the same calm he'd used to argue about whether a man should marry a philosopher's daughter. He told them the real tragedy wouldn't be him dying, but living a life unexamined. Ugh, shadows. When they condemned him, I felt like my chest had cracked open. Part of me wanted to yell. Another part wanted to melt into the crowd and pretend I didn't know him. And one small part thought, what if he's right? What if death isn't the end at all? On the day of his execution, I went to the prison. The room was stone, stark, and cold. A shaft of light came in through a barred window and fell right across his lap, like the gods were giving him a personal spotlight. And there he was, sitting cross-legged on his straw bed, talking about the soul as though he were hosting a symposium rather than waiting to drink hemlock. The cup sat on the floor beside him, full of poison. It glistened in the light. I couldn't look away. Socrates caught my eye and said, as if discussing whether olives were better green or black, "Plato, why so serious? Death may simply be another kind of waking up." Another kind of waking up. I stared at him, thinking, How can you be so calm? How can you talk about eternal truths when your body's about to shut down? But that's who he was, unshakable. Even as he lifted the cup, even as he sipped the bitter poison, he spoke gently, reminding us that death wasn't a monster lurking in the dark. It might be a doorway to the brightest light. And when his body finally went still, there was peace on his face. No panic, no fear, just a faint trace of a smile, as though he'd glimpsed something on the other side that made everything worth it. I walked out of that prison half broken and half reborn. Because if Socrates could meet death without trembling, maybe we could too. Death, to me, isn't darkness. It's the exit from the cave, a step beyond the shadows into the realm of pure reality, a place where the forms, beauty, truth, goodness shine without distortion. No screaming markets, no gossip, no political trials, just clarity. And maybe, just maybe, a reunion with all the souls who've wandered before us. Of course, I know your world fears death even more fiercely than ours did. You've built entire empires trying to outrun it. Hospitals with machines that beep like anxious hearts. Endless advertisements selling the illusion of immortality. Anti-aging serums, supplements, meditation apps promising inner peace and eternal youth for $4.99 a month. And TikTok influencers telling you the secret to living forever, right after a dance challenge. But under all those bright lights, the fear remains. You fear death. So did we. But night always surrenders to dawn. Let me tell you what I imagine. I picture death as sailing away from Athens under a sky littered with stars. Standing on the deck of a ship, feeling the cool wind whip around me. Watching the city lights fade until they're just pinpricks on the horizon. The lanterns swinging gently, the sails billowing. Heading toward a distant shore I can't quite see yet. It's not nothingness, I imagine. It's more than we can fathom. A place where the soul finally remembers who it truly is. Think about it. Why do we speak to the dead as if they're listening? Why do memories feel so alive, as though the person we've lost might walk through the door at any moment? Why does the mention of a name send warmth through your chest, or an ache sharper than any blade? Because deep down, we sense that death doesn't erase everything. That love, laughter, kindness, they linger. They echo through time. They become part of the great cosmic story. And even if you don't believe in immortal souls, you still leave ripples. Your kindness shapes the lives of others. Your words travel further than you'll ever know. Your laughter, your heartbreak, they become part of the world's memory. Once I asked Socrates, if we can't prove the soul survives death, how can you be so calm? He gave me that sideways grin and said, Plato, either death is a dreamless sleep, which sounds restful enough, or it's a journey to another place where the wise dwell. Either way, why fear it? Classic Socrates. Two options, neither terrifying. Even this fear, it passes. I won't pretend to have all the answers. I've spent entire nights pacing under the plane trees of the academy, wrestling with the question of what comes next. But I know this. Lying awake in the dark, wondering about death, is proof that your soul is more than flesh. You're not just meat and sparks of electricity. You're the being who wonders, who loves, who remembers. And as long as wonder exists, so does hope. So if death feels close tonight, whether as a thought, a memory, or a quiet dread whispering in the corners of your mind, know this. It's okay to fear it. It's human. But it doesn't have to rule you, because even the longest night has a dawn. Ugh. Shadows. Let me share one last memory of Socrates. The night before his trial, I found him outside my door, staring at the stars, muttering to himself. I said, "Socrates, are you planning your speech for tomorrow?" And he laughed and said, "No. I'm trying to decide whether the stars are holes punched in a cosmic curtain, or whether they're souls burning from the inside out." Then he slapped my shoulder and said, "Either way, I'm not afraid, because if death is a journey, I'm curious to see where it leads. And if it's nothing, then at least I'll finally get a good night's sleep." I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. That's the spirit I want you to carry, my friend. Not denial, not bravado, just gentle curiosity, a willingness to wonder. Because whether death is a sleep without dreams or a voyage to another world, it's part of the same mystery that makes sunsets beautiful, that makes music bring tears to your eyes, that makes you ache for meaning at 3 a.m. So, if your thoughts wander there tonight, don't scold yourself. Don't try to shove the fear away. Sit with it. Talk to it, like an old acquaintance. Say, "I see you. I'm afraid, but I'm still here, and I'm still wondering." Because that's the sign of a soul that's truly alive. Breathe with me again, in and out. Feel the cool air fill your chest. Imagine the hush of waves lapping against the sides of a ship. See the stars flicker above you, each one a tiny torch burning in the dark. And remember, death may simply be another kind of waking up. So, here we are, friend, you and me, still awake while the rest of the world snores into their pillows. Ugh, shadows. And if you've made it this far, I'd say we've become quite the late-night companions. Wouldn't you agree? Don't worry, I won't spring a pop quiz on you. No surprise tests about the forms or the exact number of horses in my metaphorical chariot. Though, come to think of it, it's 3. Always 3. But tonight, as the stars hang like lanterns above us and the world feels wrapped in velvet silence, I want to whisper a few final truths. Gentle ones. Nothing too heavy for the hour. Because the truth is, even philosophers get tired sometimes. Even philosophers need a soft voice in the dark reminding them that the shadows don't last forever. Everything passes, even this night. And gods, don't I know it? People imagine me as this marble bust in a museum. Smooth beard, stern eyes, perfectly pressed toga, never a wrinkle out of place. Ha! Let me tell you the truth. I did not always wear a perfectly pressed toga. Sometimes I didn't wear one at all. Once, during a heat wave in Athens, I tried philosophizing in just my undertunic. Let's just say the neighbors still haven't recovered. See, that's the thing. Philosophers aren't statues. We're human. We spill wine on our clothes. We trip over our own sandals. We stay up all night worrying about whether we've wasted our lives, just like everyone else. I, too, lay awake beneath the stars, searching for answers. So, if your eyes feel gritty tonight, if your chest feels tight with old regrets or new fears, I'm right here beside you. Let me remind you of a few things we've shared. Don't let yourself be hypnotized by shadows. Ugh, shadows. They're sneaky, aren't they? They flicker on cave walls and pretend to be reality. They whisper, "This is all there is," and convince you your worries will never fade. But they're lying. They always lie. Because beyond the shadows, there's more. I've spent my whole life trying to tell people that. I've told you about the cave, the prisoners chained, watching shadows dance across a wall, mistaking illusions for truth. And I've told you how painful it is to turn around, to climb out, to see the sun for the first time. Truth can sting. Freedom can blind you at first. But oh, how sweet the light feels once your eyes adjust. Everything passes, even this night. I've told you about the forms, those perfect eternal patterns shining behind all the chaos of our world. The form of beauty, the form of justice, the form of the good. Some people think that's just fancy talk for daydreams, but for me, it's the reason I kept going. Because deep down, I believe every glimpse of beauty we see, every song that gives you goosebumps, every look from someone who truly sees you, is a tiny spark from that eternal realm. A reminder that there's more than just stone walls and shadows. I've told you about love. Oh, love. The one thing that has kept me awake more nights than philosophy ever did. How it begins as desire for a beautiful face, a sweet laugh, the brush of fingers in the dark. But if you're wise, and sometimes even if you're not, it grows into something deeper. Love becomes a ladder, lifting us from earthly passion toward the form of beauty itself. And yes, it can still be messy, awkward, and capable of turning even the bravest philosopher into a trembling idiot who can't remember his own name. Everything passes, even this night. And I've spoken to you of the soul, my endless fascination. The tripartite soul with reason, spirit, and appetite all pulling at the reins. Your reason wants sleep. Your spirit wants to triumph over your fears. And your appetite? Well, it's still scrolling TikTok at 3 a.m, convinced that the next video will finally explain how to fix your entire life. Ugh, shadows. But listen, beneath all that chaos, your soul remembers who it is. It's not just flesh and nerves and late-night anxiety spirals. It's luminous. It's eternal. And if sometimes it feels trapped, remember, even chains can rust and fall away. I too lay awake beneath the stars, searching for answers, wondering if I'd ever find them, wondering if Athens would remember me, wondering if my words would vanish into oblivion, and sometimes wondering if the forms were just shadows of my own mind. Everything passes, even this night. You might be thinking, Plato, that's all very noble and poetic, but what good does it do me when I'm lying here with my mind on fire? Fair question. I've been there. I've stared at the ceiling replaying conversations from 15 years earlier. I've wondered whether I said the right thing, whether I lived the right way, whether any of it matters. I've felt my chest tighten with fear that everything might be meaningless. Ugh. Shadows. But here's what I've learned. The shadows only seem powerful in the dark. When the dawn comes, they shrink. And sometimes, the simplest truths are the strongest torch you'll ever carry. Don't let yourself be hypnotized by shadows. When the darkness whispers, "You'll never feel okay again," answer it back. Whisper, "Everything passes, even this night." When your own thoughts attack you, telling you you're not enough, remember, you're the being who wonders, the being who dreams, the being who can look into the dark and say, "I don't know what comes next, but I'm still searching." And that, my friend, is courage. People sometimes ask me, Plato, how did you endure all those years? The political chaos, the heartbreak, the betrayals, the loss of Socrates. And the honest answer is, I didn't always endure it well. Sometimes I lost hope. Sometimes I drank too much wine and said embarrassing things. Sometimes I hid in my room for days because I couldn't bear to face the agora. And yet, I kept coming back to the same thought. Everything passes, even this night. Cities fall, empires crumble, crowds roar and then vanish, lovers come and go, but the stars remain, and beneath those stars, the soul keeps shining, even when it's bruised and battered. I want you to remember that when you're staring at your ceiling, convinced the night will never end. When your chest feels tight and your breath comes shallow. When your mind tries to convince you you're utterly alone, you're not alone. Not now, not ever. I too lay awake beneath the stars, searching for answers. So breathe with me one more time, in and out. Feel how cool the night air is, even in the warmth of your room. Listen for the softest sounds, the hush of distant traffic, or maybe the sigh of wind around the building. Let those tiny sounds remind you that you are part of something vast, something ancient, something beautiful. And if your eyes finally grow heavy, let them close without guilt. Sleep is not surrender. It's a return to the place where questions quiet down for a little while. And dreams remind you that even shadows have their place, but they're never the whole story. So I'll leave you now with one final truth. Everything passes, even this night, and beyond the cave, beyond the shadows, there's a sun waiting to rise. Good night, my friend. Even the longest night has a dawn.